Well, those are some more of the strangest decisions that Pokemon has ever made. Do you guys hear that? Oh, you've gotta be kidding me. Why hello there, my name's Ark and I'm a penguin, and I've had a lot of fun doing this. But all good things must come to an end, I guess. And what better way to end something good than with something bad? I want to start it by saying that if you liked this game, I am 110% okay with that. In fact, I'm happy that you enjoyed it, because that means that you had a good experience. But that's just something I didn't have with this game. And I hope you guys can be respectful of that in the comments. But with all that said, let's talk about Assassin's Creed Odyssey and exactly why it's my least favorite game of all time. Assassin's Creed was at one point my favorite non-Nintendo franchise of all time. I loved all the games, even the crappy ones, and I continued to believe that there wasn't a bad Assassin's Creed game until the year of 2018. Assassin's Creed Odyssey wasn't just the first bad game in the franchise. It revealed that my opinion on Assassin's Creed was fueled by rose-tinted glasses. I only liked games like Rogue, Unity, Syndicate, the Chronicles games, 3, and Origins because they were a part of the franchise that I liked at the time. But as I've already stated, that all changed whenever I was introduced to the first game that I ever walked away from feeling genuinely upset and disappointed at in 2018. Whenever the game first came out, I remember everybody freaking out, saying that it was one of the best games they had ever played. So that obviously got me excited to try it out. I actually didn't originally buy it. A friend of mine let me borrow his copy, and as soon as I got home, I immediately popped that baby in my Xbox One, and I had to wait quite some time for it to download. But I thought to myself that that was a good thing, and that meant that this game would be jam-packed with content, and that every main and side quest would be completely different, and that this open world would have so many completely unique locations for me to explore, and that the story would be impactful, and that I'd care about every single NPC in the game. Where do I begin? Well, I guess the best place to begin is the beginning. This game opens up with possibly the most confusing dialogue in the entire game, and that's saying something. Leonidas starts complaining about how he never got to go fishing with his son and then summons the power of flexibility. Oh yeah, did I also mention superpowers? Because yeah. Superpowers. After Leonidas defeats this big buff man, you choose between Alexios or Cassandra. I've personally already played as Cassandra in my first playthrough, so I decided to give Alexios a shot. And now I can confirm that the only difference between the characters is one has boobs, the other doesn't. It then cuts to the protagonist's eagle flying over the island of Kefalonia. It then swoops down and picks up a fish from a puddle. And then drops it directly after. This has got to be not only one of the dumbest parts in the game, but one of the most pointless. And the fact that it isn't the most pointless says something about this garbage game. It then cuts to the main protagonist, who is established as the eagle-bearing Mystios, the hero of Kefalonia. The hero. That's one of my biggest problems with this game. The slogan for this game was, "It's not just an Odyssey, it's your Odyssey." And they did this pretty successfully. There have been many misleading taglines, but I think this one takes the cake for the most misleading of any I've ever heard. I think Ubisoft Quebec's idea of, "It's your story," is crappy dialogue choices. And speaking of the dialogue choices, they are the biggest evidence of this tagline being a complete lie. I'll use one of the first big dialogue options as an example. Choosing your horse. The last time I chose the horse in the middle, and the character Marco said the line, "You've chosen the great Phobos. He's never let me down." This time, I chose the horse on the left, and if you do simple math, you can decipher that new horse equals new horse. Well, that's not the case in this game, because no matter what horse you choose, it's always named Phobos, always has the same stats, and same rarity. If you're gonna give me a choice, then give me a freaking choice. And this isn't a one-time thing. This is a reoccurring thing that happens multiple times in the game.
I thought this my first playthrough, and nothing has changed. Something else I hated my first time, and hate even more now, are the completely ridiculous and stupid side quests. For an example, I'll use a side quest that I actually played on my channel, the Crewless side quest. This quest starts off with you meeting the character you'll be helping, cussing you out for no apparent reason. She says that she thinks her ship crashed, along with her crew and her own daughter. Her own daughter! Keep that in mind for the rest of this story, because this gets frickin' ridiculous. You agree to go to the crash site to go investigate. Once you arrive, you see that the ship has in fact crashed, and that the woman's daughter is in fact dead. You return to the woman to tell her that her daughter got Wii U'd, and her reaction was,
"Oh, my Yiki. All I found is her armband. Yiki. Suppose I'm not much of a captain now."
your daughter is dead, and then you just talk about your ship? I mean, that makes sense, because... Oh my god, why, Odyssey? Why do you exist? Someone who you birthed and raised since they were a fetus is now deceased. And the only thing you're concerned about is the fact that you aren't a captain anymore. You then offer her a place on your ship, and she says yes. And then the side quest ends. The whole quest is just go here, get this, come back, get reward. And these are how most of the side quests in this game are. And the few side quests that aren't like this are just plain unfun and boring. All of the side quests in this game are so shallow and just bad, and it feels like they were all rushed. Oh, but Dallas, maybe the main story helps it out. Nope! The main story is just as shallow as the side quests, if not more. You are never once given a reason to care about any of the characters in this game. For example, whenever you kill your dad in this game, it's meant to be this huge emotional moment because Alexios/Cassandra is sobbing as she grabs her father's shoulders and inserts a sword into his back. But there's one thing that renders this part of the game meaningless. This is the first time you meet your father. It's like they just expect you to be attached to him because he's the main character's dad. But that's not the case, and you find out later that he's not even your dad, which makes me care even less than I already did! And when you kill your actual dad, once again, that's the first time you ever see him! This game just expects you to feel the way that the game wants you to feel, which is just completely stupid! I could go on and on about how the story is confusing, shallow, lazy, lore-breaking, and just flat-out bad! But if I did that, then this video would be at least an hour. I cannot express to you how much I despise the narrative in this game. But I mean, hey, maybe the gameplay makes up for it.
I'm not even gonna try.
This game is the most broken piece of crap I've ever played. And when I say broken, I don't mean glitchy and buggy. And don't get me wrong, it's both of those. But when I say broken, I'm mainly referring to the leveling system. What I'm about to show you is what happens whenever you are one level below an enemy.
I've been looking forward to this day. That was easier than I thought. Looks like Zeus will have to find another messenger.
Plus, as you level up in this game, you get superpowers. Superpowers. In an Assassin's Creed game. I'm not going to linger on the horrible leveling system for too long, but I will say that it is the worst leveling system in any game I have ever played. Now, since this is an open world game, the world is a big part of the gameplay, and of course the immersion. And since this is also the biggest open world in the franchise, you'd think that every place in this game would feel unique. Right? Well, what I'm showing you right now are two completely different locations. Awfully similar, aren't they? And that's most of the locations in this game. Very rarely do you come across an area that feels interesting and is worth exploring. I also just don't like this world. To me, it's just forest, maybe a trench. I feel no incentive to explore this world, and in my opinion, that's when an open world fails. The world feels so empty and just bare-boned, especially compared to something like Breath of the Wild or any of the Elder Scrolls games. And you could make the argument that Odyssey isn't a fantasy game, but it basically is. You have superpowers, and there are literal gods in the game, and beasts fantasy-esque beasts. It's a fantasy game, and normally I'd be fine with that since I love fantasy settings. But there's one problem. Assassin's Creed is not epic Greece RPG and is more importantly not epic fantasy Greece RPG. If you don't want to make Assassin's Creed, then don't make Assassin's Creed. You're a AAA game studio. If you want to make a new franchise, then make a new franchise and don't screw up old ones. There are some terrible Assassin's Creed games, and just games in general. But I think out of every terrible game I've played in my life, this one takes the cake as the absolute worst, laziest, shallow, unentertaining, unfun piece of hot garbage game I have and will ever play. And I've played a lot of garbage games, all the way from Fallout 4 to Halo 5, but with those games, there are at least one positive in those games. With Odyssey, and I am being serious when I say this, there are, for me personally, no redeeming qualities whatsoever. I even dislike the cultist system because of how shallow and uninteresting it is. The only good thing that came from this game is that after this game, there's nowhere to go but up. This game reached a new low. A low so low that it turned me against a franchise that I once loved. This game gave me a new standard for games and made me far more critical, which isn't a bad thing. I always praised every game I played for one tiny reason. For example, Far Cry 5. I once said that Far Cry 5 was in my top 10 favorite games of all time for one reason. One of the songs in the soundtrack. And I still stand by my point that that song is one of the best pieces of music ever written. But after playing Odyssey, I looked back on Far Cry 5 and realized it wasn't a good game. In the beginning of this video, I described my old opinion of Assassin's Creed as fueled by rose-tinted glasses, and I still stand by that. I do love games like the Ezio trilogy and Black Flag, but after Odyssey, I was able to look at a bad game and say that it was a part of a franchise I liked, but the game I don't like.
Assassin's Creed Odyssey is, and always will be, my absolute least favorite game of all time. For all the reasons I brought up, plus a million more. But in a weird way, I'm actually kind of glad it was made. If it wasn't for that game, I'd be giving games like NHL 19 a 9 out of 10. This game helped my standard for video games I like, and more specifically, video games I don't like. Yes, I do hate this game with every fiber of my being, but if it wasn't for this game, I would have ended up like that one annoying guy who every time he plays a new game, he immediately puts it in his top 10 and claims it's the greatest game ever made. So I guess I kind of have to say thanks to the game. Well, Assassin's Creed Odyssey, thank you. Thank you for being a piece of